I once traded my entire Pokemon card collection for a scuffed GBA cartridge with no box, no manual, and text I couldn't even read. Best trade I ever made. You already know the Golden Suns and the Fire Emblems. This list goes past all of that, into the ones so rare, buried, or Japan only that most collectors have never even held one. This is the game that started an entire legendary RPG series. And for over a decade, if you didn't read Japanese, you weren't allowed to play it. Tales of Phantasia launched on the Super Famicom in 1995, before eventually landing on GBA, mixing sprite work from its PlayStation remake with the original's world map. And this version became the very first time English speakers could officially play the game that kicked off the entire Tales franchise, arriving a full 11 years after its original release. You're not just playing an RPG, you're playing the foundation everything after was built on, real-time combat that let you cancel and combo attacks in a genre still mostly stuck on menu selections. I remember picking this up specifically because I'd heard about the Tales series for years without ever being able to actually play its origin point, and finally holding that answer in cartridge form felt like closing a loop years in the making. This port runs noticeably slower than either original version, and longtime fans will tell you the PlayStation remake is the definitive way to experience this story. Every RPG on this list is a hidden gem. This one's the hidden gem that built the mountain everything else is sitting on. This one never left Japan, and that's genuinely a crime, because it's one of the most gorgeous turn-based RPGs the GBA ever produced. Oriental Blue drops you into a story about two parallel worlds colliding, wrapped in art design, pulling from East Asian folklore and mythology in a way that feels completely distinct from the standard Fantasy Europe RPG template. You recruit companions and monsters as you go, building a party while the story slowly reveals how these two worlds are actually connected. Every new area feels like peeling back another layer of a world that's bigger and stranger than it first appears. And the game trusts you to piece together its mythology instead of spelling everything out. I spent an embarrassing number of hours just using a fan translation guide to understand story beats I couldn't read myself, because I refused to accept I wasn't going to finish this one. But without the fan translation, this is genuinely inaccessible to English speakers. No official localization ever happened, and probably never will at this point. Most people writing best GBA RPGs lists have never even heard of this one. That's exactly why it's on mine. Here's a fact that should annoy you. The game that led directly to Mario and Luigi's Superstar Saga never actually got released outside Japan. Tomato Adventure follows a rabbit-like kid through the Ketchup Kingdom, and it plays almost exactly like the formula you already know, real-time button prompts layered on top of turn-based combat. That's not a coincidence. Alpha Dream made this first, and Nintendo liked it enough to hand them the Mario license the very next year. The core appeal is playing the rough draft of a game you already love, and watching every idea that would define an entire Nintendo RPG series show up here first, slightly rawer, slightly weirder. This one genuinely surprised me. I went in expecting a cute curiosity and came out realizing I was looking at the actual blueprint for one of my favorite Mario spin-offs. Mechanics, tone, humor, all of it. This was aimed at a younger audience. And Nintendo apparently thought Western kids wouldn't connect with a kingdom built entirely around a tomato-hating protagonist. The humor can feel a little juvenile compared to what came after. If you love Mario and Luigi, you owe it to yourself to see where it actually started. This game let you fuse weapons and shields together to build your own custom arsenal. In 2001, on a Game Boy Advance. Dokapon Monster Hunter puts you on Dakano Island as a kid chasing adventurer certification, battling through over 150 different monsters using a combination of 120 weapons and 50 shields. And here's the part that hooked me. You can capture weakened monsters and bring them along as partners, Pokemon style, except the combat leans tactical instead of purely turn-based menu selecting. This appeals to your pure collector brain. hunting down every monster type, every weapon combination, seeing what new gear you can forge for what you've captured and defeated. I remember spending an entire weekend just trying to find one specific weapon fusion a friend swore existed, refusing to believe I'd wasted that much time chasing a rumor. But without a link cable and a second player, some of the multiplayer-focused systems feel underused, and the core loop can get repetitive if you're not chasing full completion. It never got a real sequel, and it deserves way more recognition as one of the GBA's quiet monster collecting gems. Before Magical Star Sign existed on DS, there was this, and it never made it out of Japan. Magical Vacation follows a group of kids sent to defend Earth from an alien invasion. And along the way, you're capturing and training creatures in a turn-based system that plays like a stranger, funnier cousin of Pokemon. Brownie Brown, a studio founded by former Square staff, packed the whole thing with the kind of oddball charm that only shows up when a small team is making exactly the game they want. This is childlike discovery mixed with real stakes. Your kids on summer vacation who suddenly have to save the world, and the game leans hard into that tonal whiplash in a way that feels genuinely unique. I only found out this existed because someone in a forum thread casually mentioned it was basically the game before the game from Magical Star Sign, and I spent a full weekend tracking down a translated ROM just to see for myself. The humor and dialogue lean heavily on Japanese cultural references that don't always translate cleanly, even with a good fan patch. If you like Magical Star Sign, this is the missing origin story nobody outside Japan ever got to play. The first two Swordcraft story games made it to the US. The third one, arguably the best one, never did. Stone of Beginnings continues the action RPG weapon forging formula the series built its name on, but adds something new. You can actually play as your partner's summon creature, who has an entirely separate skill set from your own character, plus a transformation mode that lets that partner temporarily overpower certain enemy types your human character can't touch. Here, you're not managing one character's growth, you're managing two intertwined ones, switching perspective mid-fight, depending on what the situation demands. I tracked down a fan translation for this one specifically because I'd finished the first two games back-to-back and refused to accept the story just stopped there for English speakers. It didn't disappoint. Without that fan translation, you're staring at a fully Japanese-only menu system, and the import cartridges alone can run you more than most people paid for their entire GBA library. Two games made it out. The best one stayed home. That's the kind of injustice this channel exists to talk about. What if Mad Max had a turn-based RPG battle system and a coming-of-age road trip at its center? That's Car Battler Joe. You're crossing a sun-scorched wasteland in search of your missing mother. And your car isn't just transportation, it's your entire party. You strip parts off defeated enemy vehicles and bolt them onto your own ride. Turn-based battles playing out like duels between two rolling arsenals. The fantasy here is pure, scrappy, survivalist power. You start with a rust bucket and end up piloting something that looks like it drove out of Scrapyard Nightmare, built entirely from what you scavenged along the way. Every encounter feels like a puzzle about which parts to rip off and reuse. I'll be honest, I went in expecting a goofy novelty and came out genuinely invested in Joe's journey. There's a melancholy running under the whole game that caught me completely off guard for something with Car Battler in the title. The pacing sags in the middle third, though, and some of the desert routes start to blur together if you're grinding parts. Push through it, though, because the back half pays off everything it's set up. If you've ever wanted an RPG about building the perfect murder car one bolt at a time, this is your entire personality now. Hey, if you've made it this deep into a video about GBA RPGs nobody's ever heard of, you're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. Subscribe and tell me, which one of these have you actually owned? This is a game that strips away almost everything you'd expect from an RPG. Full movement, full exploration, and somehow becomes more emotional because of it. Riviera drops you into linear scenes where you interact with a handful of objects, choose your path through dialogue, and fight in battles built around a limited item inventory that forces real decisions about what you carry. You play as an angel sent to destroy the land of Riviera itself, accompanied by a small cast of women whose relationships with you shift based on how you play. This is intimacy over scale. This isn't about a sprawling world. It's about a handful of characters you grow to genuinely care about over a tightly written story with actual emotional weight behind its choices. I went in rolling my eyes at the limited exploration and came out replaying it almost immediately just to see a different ending play out. If you want to explore, backtrack, or grind freely, this game will actively frustrate you. It's built entirely around forward momentum and scarcity. Sting somehow made restriction feel like the entire point, and it's one of the most quietly devastating RPGs the GBA ever got.
Am I the only one who's not thrilled by the idea?
This is the GBA game that turned car rides into four-person dungeon crawls, assuming you could actually find 3 friends with link cables. Shining Soul 2 is Sega's answer to Diablo, shrunk down and handed to you in your pocket. Randomized dungeons, loot drops, and multiple classes you can build toward different playstyles, all playable cooperatively with up to 3 other people simultaneously. The appeal is pure, loot-driven momentum. You clear a floor, something drops, you check if it's an upgrade, you go again. It's the same addictive loop that makes Diablo work, distilled into sessions you can play on a road trip, trading equipment with your friends between dungeon runs. I remember 4 of us crammed onto one couch, cables tangled everywhere, all yelling about who called dibs on a weapon drop. That's a very specific kind of chaos you just don't get from modern online co-op. Played solo, this game loses a lot of its shine. The dungeons repeat visually, and the story is barely there. This is built for a group, and playing it alone feels like eating a party-sized meal by yourself. Find 3 friends with Game Boys and link cables, and this becomes one of the best co-op experiences the system ever produced. This one feels like an action RPG that got dropped on a GBA hardware that had no business running at this smoothly. You're a bounty hunter working a planet crawling with alien monsters, and instead of a static party, you recruit these creatures mid-battle and fight alongside them in real time. No menus interrupting the flow. You're dodging, striking, and commanding allies simultaneously, and it feels shockingly modern for a 2002 handheld release. The core fantasy is raw momentum. You're never standing still, never waiting your turn. Combat has this constant forward pressure that most turn-based GBA RPGs simply couldn't offer, and recruiting a new monster ally mid-fight and immediately turning the tide feels genuinely great every time. I remember renting this off a whim because the case looked cool, and I ended up missing my bus stop because I couldn't put it down. That's not nothing for a game almost nobody brings up anymore. But the story is thin, and character motivations get muddled fast. This is a game you play for the feel of combat, not the plot beats. The studio behind this clearly understood something about action RPG pacing that a lot of bigger releases still fumbled. This is one of the hardest, most unforgiving tactical RPGs ever put on the system. And that difficulty is exactly why people still talk about it. Yggdra Union puts you in command of a resistance army led by a young princess. But instead of moving individual units like a standard tactics game, you're merging soldiers into unions, stacked formations that fight and defend as a single block, with card-based tactics deciding the outcome of every clash. You're commanding an army, not a squad. Every battle feels like a chess match where a single miscalculated union can collapse your entire front line in one turn. I lost an unbelievable number of hours to one specific mid-game battle that I restarted probably 15 times before I understood the union system wasn't punishing me randomly. I just genuinely didn't get it yet. Honestly, the learning curve here is steep and unforgiving, and the game does very little to ease you into its systems. Early hours will frustrate you before they click. Sting made this, the same studio behind Riviera, and once the system clicks, almost nothing else on GBA feels as tactically satisfying. This is a game that couldn't decide if it wanted to be a shoot-'em-up or an RPG. So it just said both, and somehow it works. You're abducted by an alien race called the Krill, forced to fly missions against your own kind, and every single mission plays out as a full side-scrolling shoot-'em-up. But between missions, you're leveling stats, buying gear, and building out your ship like it's Final Fantasy in a cockpit. Here's the part that makes it click. Your weapon pods come in elemental types: fire, ice, electric, and different enemy shields resist different types. So you're constantly swapping loadouts mid-run, thinking about builds in a genre that usually just wants you to memorize bullet patterns. Way Forward, the studio behind Shantae, made this, and you can feel that same weird creative confidence in every level. I bought this purely because the box art looked unhinged. I had zero idea what I was walking into, and I remember dying over and over on an early boss thinking, wait, is this actually hard? Or am I just bad at this? Both, it turns out. But if you came for turn-based RPG comfort, the shooting sections will test you. Some stages are brutal, and there's no easing you into it. This is what happens when a studio refuses to pick a lane. Buckle in, because it only gets weirder from here. Here's a game that used actual sunlight as a gameplay mechanic on a Game Boy Advance back in 2004. Boktai 2 has a solar sensor built into the cartridge, and your weapon, the gun Del Sol, only charges when real sunlight hits it. Play in a dark room, and your gun's useless. Play outside at noon, and you're melting vampires left and right. It's a day-night system that reaches through the screen into your actual living room. Here, you're not just fighting vampires. You're managing a resource that depends on the literal weather outside your window. And that tension between I want to keep playing and I need actual sun creates a kind of urgency no other RPG on this list even attempts. I have vivid memories of holding this cartridge up against my bedroom window like an idiot praying for a cloud to move. My friends thought I'd lost it. I probably had. There's a caveat, and a big one. If you live somewhere overcast, where you're playing at night, this game will actively punish you. Kojima Productions built Genius into a format that's borderline unplayable in bad weather. Nothing else on this list demands a relationship with the sun. That alone should tell you how far ahead of its time this was. Every game on this list got buried by geography, timing, or a publisher who didn't believe in it, and every single one deserved better than that. So tell me, out of these 13, which one are you tracking down a copy of tonight? Subscribe if you want more of these, because honestly, finding games like this and getting to talk about them with people who actually care is the whole reason I keep making this channel work.